Hey guys, before we get into part 2 of my story, I want to thank everyone who watched part 1. So I'm going to take you back to that night over 27 and a half years ago, where I had my moment of truth. I realized my addiction was going to kill me, and up to this point, it had sabotaged anything good in my life. But I didn't know how to live. So on that night, I turned my life over to God and asked for guidance. I needed to know how to love myself and to have a life that I could enjoy without sabotaging it through my addiction. So the next day I called a friend who I knew was in recovery, and he brought me to a 12-step program. And the first year was the hardest, man. I went through depression. I relapsed after the first 3 months. I couldn't socialize because I was so dysfunctional, sober, and without drugs. I didn't know how to be myself outside my work, which I was passionate about. That's the one thing that kept me going and growing, was my passion for my work. So I just put all my energy into my work, but the rest of my life was terrible. And so I started asking myself, what makes me happy? What do I love to do? What excites me? And of course, I've always been an athlete, so I started working out again. But I started doing more cardio, and it seemed to stimulate my brain in a positive way. I just felt good, so I continued to do more cardio. I also continued to start reading books, anything that could help me with my thinking, positive thinking, anything that inspired me, anything that would teach me how to be better at my job, better with people, be a better person to myself, and even spiritual books, just to reinforce the journey that I began. And so I listened to tapes and I read books, and my attitude started changing, but it was still challenging. I didn't know how to be with a woman anymore. For years, all the women that I knew as friends, I slept with, because that's what you did. You partied, and if you were attracted to each other, you slept together. But after 2 dates sober, and in the midst of being intimate, my little voice inside my head and my inner voice has just said, hey, I don't have to do this. And I realized I've never had platonic relationships with women, so I made that commitment. So I started to learn how to have friendships with women. And so I started developing parts of me that have never been developed, especially emotionally, and how I responded to things, and how it was really about me taking 100% responsibility for my choices and decisions, and not blaming anybody or anything outside myself where I was in my life. I was in control of my destiny. And if I followed my inner guidance and I had faith, and what I mean by that is I started doing things that felt right, that felt good. I didn't get in my head about it, I just did it. Because if I thought about it too much, I would probably not take the action, or I'd make a different decision. And that probably wasn't gonna be great, because in the past, that didn't work. I would just screw things up. So my first few years, I just kept working, and the gym became successful. And in my 4th year of recovery, I hired a manager for a weekend manager, and he did astrology and numerology. And he validated everything I felt. Because at the time, I was racing bikes, I hired a manager, I kept kind of going away from business and more inside myself. And I was confused because I had built this business, I'd worked hard, I was successful, and the opportunity was there. I was gonna own the whole gym, but somebody else was interested. And when I did my charts for my weekend manager, he validated. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I was done with LA and I was done with this gym. And that was hard for me. And in the process, I dealt with some bulimia, and I worked through that. And, I sit here and I look back and I think it was really hard to leave Los Angeles, to leave that club. They eventually sold the club to somebody else. And I booked a month holiday to Maui, because I really didn't know where I was gonna go in my life. I knew what I loved to do, and I knew what I was good at, but I just didn't know my next step. So I went to Maui, and after a month, I decided to stay. I was single, I had money from the sale of the gym, and I had no responsibilities other than me. But the novelty wore off pretty quickly, because I can't sit around. I always have to move, and I've always worked. So after a month of staying there, the novelty wore off. I needed to get busy. I've always been productive, I've always worked, and I was going a little nuts. So something inside me said, I'm going back to college. So I took a full load in school. Psychology was it, man. I thought I always connected with people much deeper. Sales was always my strength, but I think part of my own path, and then I've always connected with people. I thought this is perfect. So I went to school. I was a master's swim team. I also got a job where they wanted a master's degree. It's through the state for social work. But because of my background with HIV and AIDS, back in the late 80s and early 90s, it hit the gay community hard. And I saw the devastation and the grieving and what people went through, so I could relate to anyone going through that process. And then because of my recovery and my past of intravenous drug use, I got the job. So I did the job, I was back in school. But I tell you what, guys, one challenge I had back then was I became a pure vegan. But really what happened, I became anorexic. And we're gonna show you some pictures about that right here because I got so skinny and so weak. And then I was doing double workouts and ocean races and my body lost all its muscle. But other than that, life was good. Another thing I did when I left LA is I went through this place inside me where I thought being spiritual was getting rid of all your material objects. So I had a beater car. I lived basically on a wood plank in about a 300 square foot place that I rented out. I had no clothes hardly, and I was kind of suffering. It was like, I went to this extreme, vegan, no material objects, but this is what it takes to have spiritual enlightenment. So I went through that process a little bit, and then the third year in school, something inside me said, I really want to work with people that want to change, and my passion was always fitness. So that's when I decided I'm going to do personal training. So that was the beginning of a whole new chapter for me. I was living on Maui, I had a good job, I was just cruising. I only wanted to make enough money so I could stay on the island, man, because the island lifestyle was good for me. It was just very, very, very healing. And for whatever reason, I needed that at this time in my life. I grew up so fast, and there was a lot of things on an emotional level that I don't think I dealt with. And so I went to a lot of workshops, went to a lot of therapy. I did a lot of things from your basic, pretty conventional, to really esoteric and sweat lodges and all kinds of different stuff. And I'll talk to more about it as you get to know me. So I was going through a lot of healing on Maui. I started my personal training job, which I loved. In a very short time after that, I met my wife. We met at the gym, actually. So after being together about 6 months, we decided to get married. And she's an incredible woman, and she had all the qualities I was looking for. At 34, I think it was, we decided to get married. And that was a big one for me because for me, just getting to be myself and to feel good about myself, but to actually share my life with somebody, and I have issues with authority, so anyone that's challenging me, I usually just do my thing or walk away or start over. So it was a big commitment for me, but it worked out really great. In 18 months after we got married, Ryan Casey, my son, was born.
What's up?
And that was another challenge. And what a gift, man, what a gift. But 5 months after Ryan was born, his mom got diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. She got really, really sick. And it was devastating. She bounced back pretty quickly the first 2 years, but then the third year she had an exacerbation and she got really sick, and the heat really exacerbates it, so she couldn't even go out of the house. And Ryan at the time was 4. And so we had a son who's 4, his mom wasn't working anymore, I was working, I was taking care of Ryan a lot, I was doing everything, but it wasn't working, she couldn't go out with her son, she couldn't go outside. So they went away to the Northwest because his mom has relatives here in Bellevue and in Canada. And when they were on holiday, they said that, they had a good time and she was able to walk around and get outside and enjoy herself. And I was reading a book, Your Purposeful Life, and I just had an inkling. I said, when they get home, we're gonna move. And so that's exactly what we did. We had some rentals, we sold everything at a good time, and we came to Seattle. We relocated, and at 40 years old, I had to start all over again. I had success in LA in fitness, I had success on Maui in fitness, and now here I am, and I don't know a soul So I had to pass out business cards and start my business from the get-go. So the first thing I did when I came to Bellevue was I went back to the 12-step meetings because I felt like I could connect people that were just like me, that had challenges with addiction, and they were on the same path. And I actually went through the 12 steps again, second time in my life. And it was good for me because I connected with people, it grounded me because I had no connections here, I knew nobody. And as I started building up my business, I outgrew one studio. Then I went to a gym 2 years later, and they wanted me to go into business with them, but it wasn't a good fit. So then I opened my own business. 8 years later, things are great. Every year it becomes more successful. But in that process of relocating here, building my business, starting my life all over again, my marriage was very, very challenging. So we went through some hard times and we decided it was time to part. So I went through a divorce, and that was about 6 years ago. So over the last 5 years, life has continued to get better. Our business here in downtown Bellevue is flourishing. Every year we have more clients we're working with, different things we're doing. It's super successful, guys. Ryan's doing awesome. My personal journey is getting better. But the thing I'm most excited about is this, the gift of addiction. This whole journey from addiction, drug addiction, to the gift of addiction is what my life is about from now till the time I leave, guys. It's my purpose and my vision to teach, empower, and inspire the millions of people that are challenged and struggle with addiction. Thank you so much for watching my video. I will be more entertaining next time. Leave comments below, and I look forward to seeing you next time.